Police lights ripped through the rain as a sedan spun sideways across my street horn, screaming like it was drowning. A man shouted for help waist-deep in floodwater, while the community park across from my house shimmered like a lake that wasn't supposed to exist. I ran outside and realized the water wasn't coming from the road. It was pouring out of the park itself, straight toward the lowest homes. Across the street, the HOA president paced behind her window, yelling into her phone like the storm might listen. I dropped to my knees where the old drain used to be and dug through mud until my hands hit solid concrete. That's when I understood this flood wasn't an accident. Karen Whitmore cut me off mid-sentence by killing the microphone. "Next item," she said already, turning her page like I hadn't just stood up in a packed room and warned her the park was failing under our feet. That was the first time she did it to my face. The second came a week later, when I found a violation notice taped to my front door, bright orange, impossible to miss, citing unauthorized drainage alterations. She'd sent someone onto my property to photograph a gravel swale I'd installed to keep water out of my foundation. It worked. That was the problem. Karen didn't argue data. She erased it. She ran the HOA like a private fiefdom. One sentence was all it took to understand her motive control mattered more than consequence. And she exercised it through action, not words. Emails bounced, reports vanished. Meetings quietly changed format so I couldn't speak. When I slid a full engineering binder onto the clubhouse table, I found it torn clean in half the next morning and shoved into my mailbox like a threat. I didn't move into this neighborhood chasing conflict. I retired here after 26 years with the Army Corps of Engineers because I wanted quiet and green space, not politics. But when Karen announced her park revitalization plan, pavers, benches, concrete paths without a single soil test, she gave me no choice. The moment I asked who approved sealing the drainage system, she smiled thinly and said, "You're seeing problems that aren't there." That smile told me everything. She wasn't trying to be right. She was trying to make me disappear. The first warning showed up on my door 3 days after that meeting. Bright orange paper, bold black letters. HOA notice violation recorded. Unapproved drainage modification. No explanation, no diagram. Just a grainy photo taken from the sidewalk angled toward my downspout like evidence in a petty crime. I hadn't altered anything visible from the street. That was deliberate. The point wasn't compliance, it was pressure. That same afternoon, my HOA email access stopped working. Messages bounced back with a generic error. When I called the clubhouse, the line rang until it didn't. No voicemail, no callback. I walked the park anyway. One slow lap, no tools, just my eyes. The shallow basin near the western edge was darker now, grass matted and slick, even after 2 dry days. Water was still trapped underneath. By evening, the neighborhood app lit up. Not about flooding, about me. Anyone else noticed Bellamy messing with drainage again, probably paranoid. 2 incidents. That was all Karen needed. She'd planted the idea. A week later, I caught them on my property. I was rechecking grade near the fence when a shadow crossed the lawn. Daniel Thompson stood there with his phone raised, snapping photos like he owned the place. "You need permission to be here," I said. He didn't lower the phone. "HOA compliance review." I stepped closer. "You crossed my property line." He smiled, small and smug. "Sue us." That night, another notice arrived, this one claiming my downspout extensions violated a rarely enforced bylaw about visual consistency. The photo angle told me everything. Someone had stood 6 feet inside my yard to get it. I appealed in writing. Attached screenshots of identical extensions on 3 board members' houses. The appeal was denied in under 24 hours. Then came the fine. $200. I didn't pay it. I sent a certified letter instead, formal, precise, citing Texas property code protections against retaliation. I included proof my reports had been submitted to the county. The fine stopped, the watching didn't. That's when the trucks showed up. Diesel engines before sunrise. 3 of them. Pavers. Crushed granite. A compact backhoe rolling straight toward the park. I crossed the street and stopped the foreman. Asked about permits. Soil tests. Stormwater plans. He blinked. "We're just laying a walkway." By noon, the vibratory roller started compacting soil. Each pass sent a dull thud through my porch boards. The last bit of natural absorption was being crushed flat. Karen arrived in heels, smiling like this was a ribbon cutting. Daniel walked beside her, gesturing proudly at the progress. I stepped into her path and asked her to stop. She crossed her arms. "The board approved it. You're sealing the lowest basin in the neighborhood. We're beautifying it." I told her the western half of that park sat in an old seasonal creek bed, that she was paving over the only buffer we had. She waved it off. You've made your feelings clear. That evening, I left a USB drive in her mailbox. Every report, every map, every time-stamped warning. I named the folder when not if. She never acknowledged it. The retaliation escalated quietly. Another violation, then another. Each one different, each one technical, each one aimed at bleeding me down or pushing me out. Someone filed a complaint claiming I was harassing contractors. Another accused me of spreading panic. A patrol car rolled through one afternoon. Slow, deliberate. The officer didn't get out, just looked at my house, then drove on. That was the point. I stopped attending meetings. Instead, I installed cameras, documented everything, reinforced my drainage underground where no one could see, regraded my yard by hand before sunrise. The HOA sent out a cheerful newsletter about the upcoming cooling rains, cartoon umbrellas, smiling boots. No mention of the sealed basin, no mention of drainage, no mention of risk. That night, I checked the forecast models. Tropical moisture, stalling pattern. 2 days out, I stopped trying to convince anyone. I started preparing. By Sunday, the sky felt heavy. Humidity pressed down like a lid. Wind shifted wrong. The kind of stillness you only notice when you've seen what comes after it. I sealed my crawl space vents, bolted plywood over basement windows, tested both sump pumps, filled sandbags, ran water through the dry well until it drained clean. Across the street, kids played on the new pavers. Solar lights blinked cheerfully. That evening, the HOA sent one last message, rain expected. Please secure patio furniture. Nothing else. I stood at the edge of my yard and watched clouds stack on the horizon, thick and slow, rolling in from the southwest. The park sat lower than everything around it now, smooth, sealed, waiting. I knew exactly where the water would go. And for the first time since this started, the thought that kept me awake wasn't anger or fear. It was this. When the rain came, there would be no warning left to give. The rain didn't arrive loud. It arrived heavy. By noon, sheets of water slammed into the neighborhood like they'd been thrown from the sky. The park darkened, first pavers vanishing beneath rippling brown pools that spread faster with every minute. By 1 o'clock, the street drains were already choking, coughing up leaves, and mulch like they were drowning. At 3, the road became a river. I stood on my porch rain, cutting sideways, watching water climb the curb and spill straight out of the park. It poured downhill exactly where I'd warned it would, into the lowest homes like a released dam. A sedan stalled halfway up Birch Lane horn, blaring as water swallowed the tires. A man waded out screaming for help. Garage alarms shrieked. Somewhere, glass shattered. Across the street, Karen paced behind her window phone, glued to her ear, shouting orders at emergency lines already overwhelmed. The storm ignored her completely. By 5, thunder rolled nonstop. Wind bent trees until they hissed. Power flickered, then died across the block. My pumps hummed steady. The neighborhood didn't. At 6:30, I heard the scream. Not thunder, not metal, a person. I ran into the floodwater, slamming my thighs, flashlight slicing through rain. Daniel stood knee-deep near his garage, clawing at a clogged drain with bare hands, panic written all over his face. "It's useless," I shouted. "The runoff's coming from the park." He turned eyes wide. What do we do? That was the moment. I pushed past him toward the western edge, where the original drainage pipe used to breathe. I dropped to my knees in freezing water and dug mud, sod, gravel until my hands struck smooth concrete. Solid, sealed. The drain wasn't clogged, it was buried. I pounded the slab rain, mixing with mud on my sleeves, the truth crashing down heavier than the storm. They hadn't just paved over it, they'd filled it completely. Minutes later, a low crack split the air. Pressure forced its way back. The concrete ruptured water blasting upward before redirecting downhill straight through the yards that had already taken the worst hit. Police lights appeared, then fire trucks, then county vehicles. By the time officials stepped into the flood, the evidence was already screaming for itself. Darkness fell hard. Transformers blew, plunging the neighborhood into black, except for lightning and emergency strobes reflected off waterlogged streets. Daniel's car alarm wailed until it drowned. Karen stood on her porch, soaked, screaming into a phone that had stopped answering. I didn't feel triumph. I felt weight. County crews arrived fast once they saw the rupture. Flashlights cut through the rain, illuminating the broken slab, the burst channel, the unmistakable signs of sealed infrastructure. One of them looked up at me. Who authorized this? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. By midnight, the storm moved north, leaving silence behind like wreckage. The park had become a lake. Half the neighborhood sat underwater. Emergency crews marked homes with tape and chalk. I shut my pumps down and sat on my porch steps, soaked, shivering, staring at what arrogance looks like when gravity finally collects its debt. Across the street, Karen's house stood dark, mud streaked 2 feet up the siding. She sat on the steps now, arms wrapped around herself. No phone, no board, no control left to wield. The rain was gone. The consequences weren't. And standing there in the quiet aftermath, I realized something else just as final. This wasn't the end of the storm. It was the beginning of the reckoning. Morning came without ceremony. No sirens, no rain, just a dull gray sky and the sound of water slowly retreating where it could. I stepped off my porch and into a neighborhood that didn't look defeated so much as stunned, like it was still trying to understand what had happened to it. The park was unrecognizable. What had been a manicured showpiece was now a shallow lake pavers, hidden beneath murky water and debris, clustered at the edges like evidence no one could argue with. City crews were already there, boots in the mud, spray painting marks on cracked concrete and snapped flags into the ground. Clipboards moved faster than conversations. This wasn't cleanup, this was accounting. Across the street, Karen stood wrapped in a bathrobe, hair pulled back, staring at the brown line etched high on her siding. 2 police officers spoke to her calmly, pointing toward the submerged park, then down the slope toward the homes that had taken the hit. She nodded slowly. No arguing, no correcting, just listening in a way she never had before. Down the block, neighbors dragged soaked furniture to the curb. Rugs came out heavy and dripping laid flat on driveways like casualties. Someone cried quietly on a porch. Someone else sat in silence with a dog wrapped in a towel. When they saw me, there were no glares, no whispers, just tired nods and eyes that didn't look away anymore. Daniel found me near my shed. He looked smaller somehow. Mud on his shoes, sleeves rolled up. "Your house is dry," he said. "It is," I replied. He swallowed. I should have listened. I didn't say anything else. I handed him a spare pump and showed him where to angle the hose so gravity would help instead of fight him. He took it like it weighed more than it did. By midday, county officials moved with purpose. One of them, older, sharp-eyed, walked me to the edge of the park and pointed at the ruptured slab. "This drain was sealed with cement," he said. "No permit. No notification. That's a Class C violation." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. They photographed everything, measured flood lines against homes, logged response delays caused by blocked access. The words preventable and unauthorized passed between them more than once. Fines were discussed. Investigations opened. Responsibility no longer lived in the abstract. By afternoon, word spread fast and quiet. Karen had resigned. Not in person, not with an apology, just an email sent before sunrise. 3 words. "I hereby resign." The board followed in pieces. Emergency votes, temporary leadership, a unanimous decision to remove every paver from the park and restore the basin to native soil. The city ordered it. The HOA paid for it. No speeches, no cheers, just acceptance. As the sun dipped low, neighbors came by, some to thank me, some to ask questions, some just to stand there awkwardly like they didn't know what else to do. I answered what I could, helped where I could, declined offers of praise I didn't want. That evening I stood on my back deck as the light softened and the air finally began to dry. Pumps hummed in the distance. Dehumidifiers rattled behind garage doors. The neighborhood breathed slow and sore, but breathing. My phone buzzed. "Dad, I saw the storm coverage." "Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine." House held. A pause. Then, did they finally listen? I looked out toward the park, toward the water that had exposed everything it touched. "Yeah," I replied. "They did." In the weeks that followed, the pavers disappeared. The cement plug came out like a confession pulled from the ground. New channels were cut. Native grasses planted. The park went back to doing what it had always been meant to do, absorb, not show off. A small sign went up near the walking path. Nothing fancy, just a reminder that the space was a runoff zone, a buffer, a place where water was allowed to be water. I never joined the board. I never wanted to. But people started asking questions now, real ones. And when the ground shifted even slightly, they paid attention. The storm didn't break this neighborhood. It stripped it down to what was true. And sometimes that's the only way anything ever gets fixed.